Hi, my name's Andy Nichols, and it was nearly 6 months ago now that I did my first review of the new CX350 camcorder from Panasonic. I've used the camera a lot since then and learnt a lot about it, and in this video I want to give you the 10 things that really bug me about this camera and 10 things that are really great to help you if you're looking to buy the camera for yourself. Firstly, I do a lot of filming work in conferences and events, so it's very important for me to have a good lank controller system. Now, for those of you that don't know, Panasonic used to have their own proprietary lank controller, and on this model of camera they've changed that to the more standard lank system as used by Sony and Canon and other manufacturers. I found it very difficult to find a good controller that works smoothly on this camera. Now, I've tried a VariZoom and I'm currently using a Liebeck controller, and I came to the conclusion that the problem was actually within the firmware of the camera rather than the actual controllers themselves. Now, I will quantify that by saying that there is a new firmware update which has just recently come out. I haven't had the chance to load that onto the camera yet or to test it, and I will be doing so and will let you know. But the problem I have with the lank controller on this at the moment is that it's just not smooth enough to get that good smooth zoom all the way through the range, tailing off at either end. It tends to stop start and be juddery in a very unprofessional way. Now, if you've had any experience with lank controllers yourselves on this camera and have found one that works really well, then please do let us know in the comments below, because it's not just me, there are a number of other people that are really interested in finding a good solution to that. But hopefully it's been addressed with a new firmware update, and we'll be giving that a try very shortly and coming back to you with an update on that in due course. One of the things we lost on this camera was the ability to be able to record MP4 files. It records MOV files, and I know that's only the wrapper, but where that really hits me on a Windows computer is not always being able to see the thumbnails on a SD card that you've recorded. It's not that simple. Some work fine and some just won't display. I haven't pinned down exactly which codecs and which formats do work and don't work at this stage, and it's possible that there may be drivers out there that will get over that and allow Windows to display them all. If you've had any experience with that, again, please do let me know. But where it's a real pain is when I want to quickly check an SD card. If I want to find an SD card to record over, or I'm just going through cataloguing the cards, it means that many times I have to open up my nonlinear editing software, load the contents of the card in just to see what's on the card, and that is really time consuming and a real pain in the butt. So please, why did you do away with MP4 files that just worked seamlessly? That I don't know, but I would really like to have that ability to record MP4 files or get this resolved some other way. Streaming, a really nice facility on this camcorder. However, you have to enter the URL and stream key using the touch keyboard on the viewfinder, using upper, lowercase letters and numbers and characters to form these great long stream keys and URL, and that's a real headache. Anyone that's been following the progress of the CX350 may also well have seen that Barry Green from Panasonic has just released his set of tutorials for this camera, which are well worth watching. And actually one of the things he pointed out on there is that you can get a free utility from Panasonic called the P2 Network Settings Software Utility, and that allows you to cut and paste and enter the stream key and URL directly into that software and then save it to an SD card. And I've just done a test with that, and that does actually work and allows me to load the stream key directly into the camera. So that's going to save a real headache. So although that's a real pain having to edit or enter those details directly on the camera, probably in most cases we will be able to take care of that before we actually go out on site and get that information. So that's going to be a real bonus. So that may well be one that comes off the list. It's great being able to do a live stream directly from the camera. But the maximum stream size you can send out is 1080, and that means that the maximum size you can record on while you're streaming is 1080. Now I can send out a stream to Facebook in 720 and record at 1080 in camera, but I cannot do a live stream for a client at 720 and then present them with a 4K copy at the end of the day. You can't record in 4K on this camera while you're streaming, and that's a bit disappointing. In most cases, if it's a conference or something like that, the client doesn't usually want a 4K recording, but clearly there are going to be times when I'm going to have to explain to the client, yes, I can do that, but I can only deliver you a 1080 file at the end of it. So that's just one to be aware of if that's important to you. Another issue with streaming, I recently had to do a stream to Facebook, and I discovered that the RTMP URL had changed to an RTMPS URL. And I had to go through the process using the on-screen keyboard to edit the URL that was in there and work my way back through and add an S in. The good news is that worked, and I was able to connect to that stream. However, what I wasn't able to do was to save the RTMPS stream key to an SD card through the menu system. That seems to be just something that's lacking in the firmware, and hopefully something that's easily updatable. When you try and save the RTMPS key, it just gives an error message. The other good news is, again, having tried the P2 network software, I am able to load that with an RTMPS key straight into the camera, so that does work. But hopefully these are niggly little things that will be able to be sorted out through future firmware updates. Autofocus. Yep, it sucks. It's just one thing Panasonic do not seem to be able to do very well, where everybody else now can. So I really wish they would get their act together on that one. That said, I'm not the sort of person that uses autofocus very much. I come from the old school maybe, where I will zoom in, get focus and zoom back out. That is not so easy on this camera with a servo zoom. And there are occasions, of course, maybe at a conference or an event where things are changing on stage and you change your shot, you can't stop recording or can't stop giving output, so you need to be able to refocus. And there are some nice focusing tools. You can punch in, you have got peaking, and in fairness they haven't let me down as yet, but having autofocus a good reliable autofocus system can sometimes be a real bonus. What I do use is the push auto focus button, which just grabs focus, and in most cases that works okay, but it hunts around and you just get that shimmering on the image, which again just looks very unprofessional. So it's not ideal. I'm sure, like many users, we would all just wish that Panasonic would come out with a really good and reliable autofocus system in this day and age. Coming back to this servo zoom, I mentioned that for focusing I want to get in, get out, focus up. On my PX270 I just had a lever on the lens. I could crank that in, do my focus, pull it back out, all was good. On this I'm having to rely on the servo mechanism within the lens to zoom right in, focus, and then zoom right back out again. On a run and gun scenario it just takes way too long. Now there are some speed adjustments, and on the latest firmware that I've still yet to install, some of that should be addressed, and that the zoom speed should be much more controllable and faster. I've yet to put that to the test. I will do so, and I will give you an update in due course. But for run and gun work at the moment, the servo zoom, it just doesn't cut it in terms of being able to get in and out quickly. Just a fairly slow zoom, and it's just not accurate enough in my book. It's one of the big areas that kind of lets this camera down a little. Like anything, it all depends whether that's a key important factor for you. It's certainly not something that's a showstopper for me, but it really could be that bit better. Another one of the things that kind of caught me out that I didn't look up in the specs before I bought the camera, or even saw that it was something that was that important to me, was the ability to be able to record at 24 frames a second. Now I could record at 24 frames a second on my DVX200, and where that catches me out here, it's a little bit specialized, but again, it might be something that's important to you. I film a lot in cinemas, and very often we're filming a Q&A session with people sitting up on the stage, and there will be a big logo or screen up behind them projected on the screen about the film that we're talking about, and that will be flickery because it's being projected at 24 frames a second. I'm recording at 25. I'm in the UK, so we're using 50 Hertz. Now I know if I switch that to 60 Hertz, I could set that to 2397, but then I'm recording at 60 Hertz and my lighting is going to cause me a flicker because that's running at 50 Hertz. So I've yet to find a good way around that. I can't null it out with a shutter speed, and in some cases I've had to actually use my GH5, which records at 24, to get around that problem. I do a lot of events work, and one of the things that nearly caught me out recently was on an event where we tried to sync all the cameras together, and it was the first time I'd realized that when I looked at all the inputs on the camera, there's no actual Genlock input, so you can't sync this camera to other cameras. You can sync timecode and you've got SDI out, but there was no way to sync the cameras together going into the vision mixer. It wasn't a major problem for us in this case, but it was the first time that I actually spotted that. And again, if that's something that's important for your workflow, that's something just to be aware of. Number 10, and I'll stress, this is not something specific to the CX350. I think it's the same on any of the Panasonic cameras, but it's something that really bugs me. I'm used to working with P2 cameras, which use very robust cards, and one of the things that's really nice with these new camcorders is the ability to be able to record on 2 SD cards simultaneously. That's a fantastic feature. I mean, I have had SD cards fail on me in the past, never on an important job, touch wood, but I have seen them fail. So when there's a big event on and I'm really nervous about recording to SD cards, at least I can record to 2 SD cards at once. However, I also like to make use of the review last clip feature, which is the single button, which incidentally you can't reassign, so I can't use that button for anything else. But when you're in dual recording mode, in simul recording mode, you can't check what you've just recorded to give you that confidence that you're recording okay to the card. Now, I kind of get that you're recording to 2 cards at once, but you know, it can't be that difficult. Just play back what's on card 1. Card 2 is only a copy of that anyway, and at least it will show you that you're recording something to the card. Why can't we have that? It would just makes that feature completely useless to me, and it's a really important feature that I really like to use. So please, Panasonic, I'd really like you to do something with that and just be able to play back maybe card 1 the last few seconds, just to show that it's recording something on the card. That would be really useful to me. Well, that's the negatives, but there's also plenty of positives. So let's now look at the 10 things that are really nice with this camera. One thing that's great on this camera is the fixed lens, and having the ability to go from somewhere around 24.5mm and a 20 times zoom on that all the way in. It's a really nice throw on that lens, and I found that to be very useful. If I'm filming indoors in a small room, that wide angle lens is a real bonus, but also I've got that great throw for distance filming as well. Following on from that, the eye zoom feature on this camera is also fantastic. That allows you to crop into the sensor with no loss of resolution, so it's not the same as a digital zoom, but it just gives you that little extra, even in 4K, that you can zoom in if you need to. On a recent event, I was able to use a CX350 for the first time as a front of house camera, which is 50 meters away from the stage. Normally a 20 times lens is just barely good enough to get a full height shot from there, but in HD mode and we were outputting SDI at HD, I was able to drop the camera down into HD mode, get the maximum out of the eye zoom, and that really allowed us to push into a much nicer shot. That feature works really well for me. Probably one of the best things about this camera for me is the size and the weight. This is a kilo lighter than the DVX200 and it fits in my rucksack. I'm able to take this out on a job on a train or a bus or something like that when I'm traveling around, where previously I might have chosen to take the GH5 in my backpack. Now I can work out which camera I prefer to have, which is the better camera to take, and I'm not worried about taking this one out with me on a long journey if I'm not in a vehicle. It's just so much more manageable. The image quality on this camera is pretty amazing, and I'm not using it anywhere near its full capabilities of 400 meg all intra codecs. Most of my work looks stunning even at 150 megabit and long GOP or the various other codecs on here. I'm very pleased with the image quality on this camera. The choice of codecs on this camera is amazing as well. You can record right down from AVC HD codecs right the way up to 400 megabit all intra codecs in H.264 and H.265 and various other flavors. So very flexible, very versatile camera for a whole range of projects. Another feature that's really nice on this camera is having this side mounting point. Now I've mounted a small rig hot shoe mount on there where I can mount a second mic pack, and this is a configuration I use quite often where I'm using two separate mic packs at the same time, and just being able to fit that on the camera like that is really handy. I'm sure we've all been in that circumstance where you end up with mic packs just hanging off or dangling or taped to the camera somehow just to fit them all on. So that's a really welcome addition. But if anybody knows anyone that's starting to make little adapter brackets that will actually screw on there a bit firmer and actually made for this camera, that would be really good to know. So just let us know in the comments below. Not specific to this camera, I mean my PX270 was able to do this, but it's certainly a feature I really missed on the DVX200, was being able to use both the LCD screen and the viewfinder at the same time. On the DVX you had the little sensor on the eyepiece that would switch the screen off and flick between the two, which it would always do at an inappropriate moment. So just being able to have both of those on permanently is a real bonus for me. That's a nice feature I like on the CX350. Low light performance. Well, this camera is definitely not the best in terms of low light performance, but I'm really impressed, and it's perfectly good enough for most of the work that I do. When I bought the DVX200, part of my reasoning on that was to go for the Micro Four Thirds sensor, which not only matched my GH5 but had a bigger sensor that would gather more light and probably be better in low light. But I think this outperforms the DVX in low light. It's a newer generation of sensor. Even though it's smaller at 1 inch, it is performing really well. So I've been very pleased with the low light images that I've got from this camera so far. When I first looked at the streaming capabilities of this camera, I thought, well, that's nice, but who's actually going to want to stream from a single camera? I can understand having 3 cameras and cutting and doing a live stream, but if you want to do a single camera stream, why not just use your phone? But of course you've got much better optics and much better sound capability built into one of these cameras. And I think one of the things that surprised me more than anything is I've had a stream of people now who wanted to use that facility. I've got bookings coming up for conferences where they want me to stream. I've been abroad streaming in various events. So I've actually used it a reasonable amount so far, and there seems to be no shortage of people that are keen to actually make use of that feature and do live streams even from a single camera. So having that has been really nice. And finally, the overall performance of the camera in terms of the firmware and software and menu structure. They've changed the menu structure slightly on this camera, but everything is really accessible, very easy to find, and it tends to work very quickly. On many older cameras, switching between various modes and various different codecs may require rebooting the camera, whereas a lot of the time switching between any of the functions on this camera are instantaneous. There's no waiting for lag in the menus or anything like that. It seems to be very well powered and able to deal with everything. That makes it just that much quicker to use out in the field in run and gun scenarios, to suddenly change options from one thing to another that previously on some cameras I would have hesitated doing because I knew it would just take too long and I may miss the shot. So that's been a welcome feature on the 350. Well, that's nowhere near an exhaustive update on the camera, but I wanted to give you a few of my thoughts on what I like and don't like about the camera 6 months on, especially if you're looking to buy one. Hopefully I'll be catching up with my colleague Matt in the not too distant future and getting his thoughts on how he's finding the camera after 6 months use as well. And if you've got any questions that you'd like us to cover in that, please do leave them in the comments below and we'll try to address them in the next video. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and I'll catch up with you again soon.